The more I think about that Aston Villa game, the more I'm annoyed about it, really. I think I'm annoyed for a couple of reasons, but one of the main ones is a sort of ongoing theme, which is the failure to recognise opportunity. I mean, it goes way back. It goes back to the first season when it looks like we were about to qualify for Europe. And we did. We qualified for the Europa League. That was absolutely brilliant. Well done. However, when we got to sort of Christmas time, there was a real good chance to strike for Champions League, and we didn't do it. We didn't do it. We didn't go for it. We didn't invest in January. The same thing happened the season afterwards. And I thought that one was absolutely pivotal. I think there was a real chance to convince Declan Rice to sign a new contract. Now, just put to one side for a second whether you think we're better or worse without Declan Rice. I know a lot of people think that the midfield has been better since he left. But just put that to one side. Just look at it as if the club wanted to get him to sign a new deal. And I don't think it was ever about money. I think it was about ambition. And it was about recognising the opportunity. And I think at that point, it was for the club and it was for David Moyes in particular to think, right, this is not only the opportunity to again go for that top four, but actually it's the opportunity to convince this player that he can stick around. And it was really weird because actually it turns out the transfer window afterwards, so I felt we should have invested in the winter window. Come the next summer window, we splashed out loads of money. I just think it would have made a really big difference if we'd have done that in the winter window. But we didn't. And it was opportunity. And you know what? It sort of turned out okay. We qualified for the Europa League. And, of course, the season after, we were in the Conference League, and then we went and won the Conference League. So you can look back and think, well, you know what, no harm done, everything was absolutely fine. But that doesn't mean because we achieved something that we couldn't have done any better. The opportunity was still there for us to push on and go forward and get that Champions League football. And we just never really did it. And this is a hallmark of I feel, of certainly, well, it's a hallmark of West Ham down the years, let's be perfectly honest with you. But I think it's a hallmark of maybe David Moyes' reign. When you hear it a lot, he mentioned it last week, about West Ham needing to build and build slowly. And you know what? I think there's something to be said for building slowly. I think there's something to be said for having solid foundations. But there's also something to be said for building rapidly. And I think that's what Unai Emery's done at Aston Villa. He's not looked at it and he's not thought, look, I'm going to make a team that's going to establish itself over a long period of time. He's thought, I'm going to build, I'm going to do it now, I'm going to make us effective now. And you certainly don't feel when he's going into the transfer window that he's not addressing key positions because he feels that he has to wait and he has to do it in the long term. Yet the funny thing is we find ourselves in a position of opportunity again now, which is why I'm talking about it. Well, I say now, it's gone. The opportunity is gone. And I think that opportunity was to really put a dent into one of our rivals. And we were so bad at it that actually I would honestly suggest after that game, possibly even Aston Villa aren't one of our rivals at the moment. They were so much better than us. But the opportunity was there to, if we'd have beaten them, it would have been us. It would have been us knocking on the door of that top four just outside and looking to get in with a good run of games ahead of us. Now, it may well turn out that we win those games and we do really, really well in them. But again, we've already sacrificed the points, and we do this all season, every season. Every season, we look at fixtures and we sacrifice a point or three. And this game was really one of them. I'm not saying Aston Villa were there for the taking. They're a really good team. I mean, they thumped Brighton, didn't they? So I think maybe at the end of the season, we might look back and think, well, actually, it wasn't the worst result in the world. I wouldn't mind thinking David Moyes probably looks at Aston Villa and thinks, well, Aston Villa are a really good team. And if he does think that, I would just say to him, well, hold on, mate. In which case, why are they a really good team? Because they weren't. Because actually, we were one of the reasons, as I remember rightly, why. We helped put the boot in on Steven Gerrard, if I might remember that wrong, but I certainly think that was the case. And I wonder why if David Moyes doesn't look at it and think, wow, they've made quick progress. Why can't I make quick progress? The real problem on this, as I see it, though, is the striker situation. And this goes back to the first time I think we missed the opportunity, and that was to buy a striker in the January window. In the end, David Moyes said, actually, we don't need one. We don't need one. We'll get Jesse Lingard, he can do it. And you know what? He sort of could. So David Moyes had a point, really. But again, it doesn't mean that getting a striker in as well won't also improve things. We kept the money, and we saved the money. In the end, we went and bought Gianluca Scamacca. Didn't work out, completely unsuited to David Moyes. We've wasted years on it, years. And then we go and bring in Danny Ings, another striker, completely unsuited to the way we play. And all the while we're doing this, we're doing okay. We're actually doing quite well, to be honest with you. But it stops us excelling. We do all right. We do pretty well, but we don't excel because for too often, I'm not saying we're playing with 10 men. We're not. Because Michail Antonio can have some good games and he can be quite pivotal. But what we're doing is we're playing with some really good players. We've got some really good midfielders, haven't we? Some good defenders, good goalkeeper. Yet we still are that team that don't play with a recognised striker. Because he's not. Antonio's not a recognised striker. His goal output doesn't match that of a striker. And I tell you what, there's been a few times, and particularly that game against Aston Villa, where it doesn't even look like he's that player who's going to even knit everything together. Myself and Gio were talking about Firmino relatively recently, and it might have been the build-up show, actually, to Aston Villa game. Firmino could get away with not scoring. He ties everything in together. Antonio wasn't even doing that. Antonio was a hindrance. Our attacks were faltering because of the inability he had, because of his poor technique, because of his poor passing. Now, I know I said it in the other video, but I'm not sure. I think possibly we may well have been in a situation where we might have been able to win that game. We started off well. At the very start of that game, we were a better team. And we got in behind their defence. Paquetá was opening them up. He really was. He was getting that ball behind their defence. And we just weren't able to do anything. Listen, I don't know how much of this is true, by the way, but you hear that actually Ivan Toney wants to leave Brentford. We're not interested in him. We weren't interested in when he was at Peterborough. It doesn't have to be Ivan Toney, but somebody. And I really do hope that, I'm not looking to undermine the manager on this one, but I do hope, bearing in mind we've got a recruitment team, that actually they get together and somebody for once says to David Moyes, just get a bloody striker. And I don't mean one like Danny Ings. I'm going to buy in Danny. I don't know where. Some people say Danny Ings was bought for David Moyes. I just don't know. Who knows? But somebody to go in there, it's going to have to be Tim Steidten, to look at the way Moyes is playing, think, right, he needs a pacey, strong striker. And ideally someone with a little bit of technique. Or, you know what? It's often said about Michail Antonio, people call him a right back. As people say, I saw him play at Reading, he played right back at Reading. You know what? I think he's made a really good fist of playing up front on a lot of occasions. But I'll tell you what, sometimes he looks like someone that used to be a right back playing as a striker. And that happened against Aston Villa. It used to be, under Pellegrini, was a really, really effective impact substitute. Really effective. And now it's gone. We just don't see him as that impact sub anymore. I think the worst thing is, I looked at the team and I looked at what Moyes did with Mohammed Kudus. I'm not sure that's the answer. I do think Kudus should be in the team, don't get me wrong. But I'm not sure the answer lies within the club. He may have to jiggle it around. He may well have to put Bowen up there. He may have to do something or other. But whatever he's got to do, he's got to do it. He really does. Not because it's the end of the world. Not because we'll get relegated. But it's just when opportunity knocks for us to get into European competition again, which is what we all want, he's going to need a striker. He cannot keep doing this. I was surprised that he played him. I know Gio wasn't surprised that he played him, but the reason I was surprised is because that's how Michail Antonio plays after every international break. I always like to give people a benefit of doubt. I like to think that, well, listen, Moyes is old school, but clearly he's going to look at data. And I do like to think, well, hold on a second. Surely he can see the data of how bad Michail Antonio is when he comes off international break. It's got to stop. It really has. Give something else a go. Give someone else a chance. Let's get to January. In the meantime, let's give Mubama a chance. Let's give Kudus a chance. Let's give Bowen a chance up front. Let's bring Callum Marshall through if we need to. But let's put Michail Antonio on that bench. And then when we get to January, and I mean at the start of January, so we're not impacted by this African Cup of Nations, we need to go out there. We need to get a striker, one that's Premier League oven ready to hit the ground running, because I just think it's the difference between us being okay and having a decent season and us really going for it. And I've got to say, with the exception of that Conference League, I always get the idea that David Moyes never really goes for it.